Welcome to Web3 Watchdogs, the podcast that takes a deep dive into the world of Web3 security, compliance, and risk. Join Michael Pearl as he interviews executives from across the Web3 industry to uncover the challenges and opportunities of this rapidly evolving space. Web3 Watchdogs is sponsored by CyVers, your one-stop shop for Web3 security and threat mitigation. CyVers harnesses the power of AI to eliminate hacks, scams, fraud, and compliance challenges in real time, and even before they happen. For more information, visit cyvers.ai. That's CYVERS.ai.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Web3 Watchdogs podcast. And today we have with us Ian Wallis. Ian leads the business development and partnerships efforts for Linea. Linea is a leading Ethereum L2 with a focus on security, compliance, and payments. Love it. Prior to that, Ian led business development for Consensus and MetaMask, leading security partnerships across the wallet security and on-chain smart contracts monitoring and security. And previously to that, Ian held a variety of different roles at Oracle, at several startups, consulting. Basically, you have a very, very interesting career, Ian. First of all, thank you for being here, obviously.
Hey, Michael. Yeah, great to be with you. And looking forward to the chat.
Perfect. So let's dive into that. And perhaps you can tell us in a few words about your professional background, what you've learned, and how you ended up in Linea and what you're doing right now in Linea.
Yeah, no, I've been in IT for quite a long time, but I'm just coming up to my 10th anniversary of my first on-chain transaction, which is something that's quite a nice little milestone. And moved sort of full-time into the Web3 space back in 2021 and started helping MetaMask with their BD activities. Initially around, how to manage relationships with the large gatekeepers like Apple and Google and Mozilla and those sort of organizations, and how do we sort of ensure that MetaMask didn't get deplatformed. But then it sort of evolved into trying to improve protection of users, and we had a lot of challenges with users getting their digital assets drained out of their wallets and so on. So we were trying to do a lot of different sort of work streams to improve the user experience and make sure that users felt safe within the wallet. Yeah, then more recently, I've been helping Consensus lead business development across the different products. And in the last few weeks, I'm now sort of dedicated to Linea and focusing in on, our steps towards decentralization of the Linea L2. So it's very exciting. A lot of exciting things coming.
Great. So basically, you have a wallet security experience, blockchain security experience. So we'll have a very interesting talk for sure.
Yeah, and I've more recently been doing a lot around compliance as well for making sure that we have all the sort of compliance set up on chain as well.
Oh, so that's interesting. So why don't we start from that? What are the compliance constraints or rather requirements for an L2 blockchain?
Yeah, so at the moment, as an L2 with, we're basically being run as a non-profit based out of Switzerland, and we have a robust path to full decentralization of the L2. So we don't explicitly have requirements on the L2 with regards to compliance, but our partners in our ecosystem have those requirements. So the requirements tend to come with the on-ramp providers that are on-ramping fiat funds onto Linea. They come from the stablecoins that are looking to mint and burn on Linea, and they want to sort of know that they're not sort of minting stablecoins into wallets that are sanctioned, or or they're not adhering to OFAC type requirements. So and then also with our integrations with the centralized exchanges as well, where the centralized exchanges want to be able to transfer in and transfer out from the wallet. And I think it will also extend to things like, as we start to see virtual bank accounts get set up, and those sort of integrations, we'll see more compliance requirements there as well. So it really is about the rails between sort of fiat and on-chain, and providing sort of the necessary compliance tools for those partners and ecosystem players to be able to operate on Linea.
So are those, let's not call them requirements, let's call them guidelines. It's basically self-regulation that you impose on yourself as a blockchain that wants to position itself as compliance and security first? Or is it something that comes from your partners that are obligated to regulators or different jurisdictions?
From a compliance perspective, it's coming from our partners. I think this will evolve as we sort of mature, and we may start to impose specific compliance norms or sort of methodologies as well. But I don't think we're quite there yet. I think we're more evolved on the security side around the processes and procedures that we have. Clearly, with things like certain things that we do manage that sit on top of the L2, such as the bridge and so on, we have to make sure that those are compliant and that we're not breaking sanctions, ZOFAC type regulations. But the L2 itself, at this stage, we don't have any hard requirements, and we're sort of, I think, evolving and finding our way as to what we'll need to adhere to. But it's clearly, as we decentralize the sequencer and the prover, it will be up to each operator of those nodes that will have to, decide what, they're going to adhere to in terms of compliance, which is the same on any decentralized network where, you have the same sort of challenges with, running decentralized nodes or, decentralized clients on Ethereum. And, some of them will take all transactions and others won't,
Yeah, it's always this tension between decentralization and security and anonymity, compliance. It's always there, right? We went from being maximalists to figuring out that, you need some sort of sense of compliance, security, and eventually this might harm decentralization. But if you want people to trust the system, it's probably something that you cannot avoid, right?
Yeah, and I think we try to find a sort of middle ground where what we've done with security is we've really tried to lead the way by, first of all, adopting what we think of as security best practices for the chain without bringing in a full sort of layer of censorship onto the chain. So this is about adopting sort of best practice for things like security monitoring, and monitoring the things that we had control over, which were things like the bridge and other smart contracts that we managed, to make sure that those smart contracts didn't get attacked and drained. And then what we did was working with security providers like CyVers, we then encouraged our entire ecosystem to adopt this type of approach and technology. But we decided to do it by sort of showing the way. We would integrate security monitoring alerts into our security operations center, and then have like a feedback loop to be able to either pause or do some other changes to the protocols that we controlled, so that we could react to security threats. And then we encouraged the ecosystem to adopt this. And that was one by sort of, first of all, promoting these security services, but then secondly, we actually drove some incentive programs as well. So one thing that we triggered sort of earlier this year was an incentive program called the Surge. And for a protocol to basically participate in this incentive scheme where users would be rewarded with points for deploying liquidity. But for a protocol to participate in that Surge program, they had to have a security monitoring in place, so that we knew that, we were only incentivizing protocols that were well protected and we're adhering to sort of good best practices. And, I'm really pleased with the results of it, because we've seen very broad adoption of security monitoring in the DeFi ecosystem that sits on Linea. We've had very, very low number of attacks and incidents. And so we've really sort of tried to drive a sort of security first sort of approach and methodology without like explicitly censoring transactions at the sequencer level, which is, I guess that's the sort of next level of security and but it does change things dramatically because you cannot decentralize if you take that approach. You have to control the sequencer yourself. And so we thought we'd try this approach where we encourage the ecosystem and drive best practices and incentivize good. I think that has just filtered through right throughout our ecosystem. And so each of these protocols are usually audited a number of times, and they have security monitoring on top. And then I think what's going to happen is we're going to adopt the same approach with compliance. So the stable coins we work with, the centralized exchanges that we work with, the on-ramp providers that we work with, we're going to encourage them to apply best practices around compliance as well, and just make sure that our entire ecosystem stays on the right side of compliance regulations. Now, clearly, those compliance regulations are going to evolve and change over time, so it is going to be a dynamic space. But we see this as a sort of an early stage of how we're going to ensure compliance within these decentralized networks.
Yeah, I think it's a very healthy approach because, when you look at the large bevy of the L1s and L2s, there are quite a few of them that, define themselves as security first. But if you only focus on the level of security of your core smart contracts or the sequencers, and you really don't overlook the security of the projects that are built on top of you, because eventually those are the touch points that are going to be working with the end users, right? So I think that Linea took a very healthy approach of encouraging the projects as well to implement security measures and obviously primarily real-time monitoring. And I think that's a very interesting approach. And perhaps that's the reason why Linea is considered to be secured also in terms of the performances, right? Because as you've mentioned, the amount of incidents was minimal.
Yeah. I think, in terms of a major public incident, I think we only had one, and we were able to partially intervene with the help of, CyVers and our other partners. And, the same thing happened on a separate L2, and they didn't intervene at all. So it was nice to see that, like, our security ecosystem kicked in and, warned us, even though it wasn't their responsibility to monitor those, and be able to then help us sort of start to react to those that security threat. So I was really pleased that definitely the monitoring capabilities worked perfectly in my mind, and that I saw you guys and a number of other partners really execute really well. I think that it is about trying to work with an ecosystem, and so we've also been working closely with wallet providers and with the security providers at the wallet level. We've been working with other other partners around trying to protect the different brands that are doing TGEs on Linea, and stop sort of these scam projects from these scam accounts from popping up, trying to create phishing attacks for the tokens that are being launched on Linea and so on. So we did have a very comprehensive program which banned trying to stop phishing, trying to stop wallet drainers, trying to stop malicious smart contracts that were trying to drain protocols. There's so many layers to Web3, and as we bring in new technologies into the space, I see that continuing with the need to have lots of layers of protection for both the users and the developer teams.
Yeah, there are so many points of failure, or rather vulnerability, such as bridges and the TGE process, where it can be very risky both from the security standpoint and from the compliance standpoint. And it's very important that you map all those incidents and basically know how to contain, or rather even prevent beforehand, any such threat that can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a game of cat and mouse with these malicious actors, right? And they're trying to find the path of least resistance to be able to steal funds or trick users out of their out of what they've saved or their digital assets. And our goal was to try to make Linea and MetaMask places which were not easy places for those actors to operate, and they would go elsewhere. And so we have seen on the MetaMask side, a number of these drainer teams start to focus on different ecosystems, like and wallets on Solana, for example. We've seen on the Linea side that there's a lot more sort of targeting of other chains now, and that's a combination of the security capabilities that are monitoring Linea, but also the fact that there's obviously easier pickings elsewhere as well. And I'm very pleased with how things are going so far. But we can never really be complacent about it because, as you said, once you sort of have a set of protections for a certain set of capabilities around either the wallet or the protocols, these malicious actors will try to circumvent these approaches. They'll try to trick them. They'll try to find different ways, different techniques, and so it is a continuous game of evolving capabilities. And I think it just gets more sophisticated as AI comes into the fore as well.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And obviously we see that as well in CyVers, both in terms of, social engineering, so to speak, methods that are being implemented with the help of AI. And now there's also chatter about, maybe in the near future about quantum computing being put in place to help hackers. So definitely you have to stay ahead of the curve to keep up with the technology.
Yeah, and I think it's a combination of evolving the techniques and making sure that you're measuring what's happening on chain or within the wallet to the users, collecting that feedback, and making sure that as you see new threat vectors appear, that you can then feed those back to we want to feed those back to our partners and make sure that we're protecting users and developers as best we can. But also, I think it's necessary to, also just sort of evolve the techniques with the ecosystem and have a healthy ecosystem of different players who can try different things. Because I don't think it's like one organization or company that can solve for all of this. It requires an entire ecosystem to be able to protect a decentralized ecosystem. Because it's permissionless, and it's so geared towards the attacker, right? The attacker just has to find one vulnerability and get it right once, and be able to exit with the stolen funds. They just need to do that once, whereas we've got to basically get this right 100% of the time. We can't allow it to happen once, and so it is very geared towards the attacker. But working with an ecosystem of security and compliance players is for us vital to stay ahead of what these malicious players are doing, and just discourage them from get it to a point where it's a waste of their time and money to be trying to attack our ecosystem and our users and our developers, and let them go off and do other things. There's plenty of things that they can do in the Web 2 world as well. So that's all we're trying to do, is absolutely increase friction for so that this isn't an easy place for them to operate.
So you've mentioned MetaMask a few times, and for our listeners who perhaps don't know, MetaMask is probably the most popular non-custodial wallet out there. I'm curious, after being in MetaMask and obviously in Linea, what kind of security measures does MetaMask have as a wallet? Because just to give you one pointer, according to our internal data, and we're about to publish this in our 2024 report, the hack incidents for wallets have spiked significantly. When I say significantly, I'm talking about 1,000%. And wallets are targeted much more frequently, and the amount of funds that are stolen are much bigger than the ones that are being stolen from smart contracts. We hear about DeFi, hacks all the time, but wallets are the main targets. So I'm curious, what kind of security measures, what kind of, ecosystem, just like the one that you've mentioned with respect to the L2? What kind of an ecosystem is built around MetaMask and how it is implemented?
Yeah, so we basically looked at the problem in like the different stages that a user goes through to connect to a DApp, connect the wallet, then go through a sort of simulation and a confirmation, and then sign an actual transaction to move funds or do something on chain. And so we've sort of looked at it right from the start. And so, it starts with, for example, a malicious actor pretending to be MetaMask support or pretending to be a MetaMask airdrop or something like that. And so we already have like brand protection for all of our brands that take down Twitter accounts that are pretending to offer MetaMask support or MetaMask airdrops or MetaMask this or that. There's these fake accounts appear everywhere. They appear on Twitter. We quite often see them in Google Ads where they say, where there's a fake MetaMask support number. There is no phone number for MetaMask. So if you see a MetaMask phone number, it's a scammer. And so, Google Ads appearing and all sorts. So we're constantly taking these down and blocking these players. That's the first step. And we're working with an amazing partner called Chain Patrol on that space, and encouraging our partners as well, who are sort of launching their own brands to adopt these sort of techniques. Then we have our own sort of phishing detection, which is a sort of lightweight phishing capability, which is integrated with the Security Alliance, the SEAL team, and a number of other players, and it sort of collects known malicious websites, and we block them. We block them before the user can even connect their wallet, because as soon as the user connects their wallet, you're basically exposing all of your financial history to the attacker, and then the attacker can go and try to start targeting specific assets that they want to drain out of the wallet. So we have that sort of it's been a big red screen that you sometimes see when you connect to a malicious DApp. Beyond that, we then have brought in things like simulations to be able to clearly simulate what's going on within the transaction, and we're going to be launching clear human readable transactions very shortly as well. So you'll have full human readability of
that's very important. Yeah.
And then beyond that, we then have like malicious transaction detection as well, where right at the end, before you sign the confirmation of where you're signing the transaction, we actually flag and bring a pop-up saying, watch out, you are about to sign something that is going to drain your wallet. And we warn against the user then signing it and try to put some friction in there. And I almost like treat it like a football team, right? A soccer team, where, brand protection would be my midfield, my defensive midfield, and phishing detection would be my sort of defensive midfield. And then I've got sort of things like, we've got a number of sort of techniques, which I'm not going to disclose entirely, but techniques that I would call my sort of defensive layer. We recently acquired Wallet Guard, and they've been helping us with a number of sort of techniques to detect, malicious actors and drainers and so on. And I've got my defensive field, and then I've got simulations, and then I've got like and then my sort of malicious transaction detection is almost like the goalkeeper, right? It's like the diving save before the ball enters the goal. And so we treat it like a whole team of different sort of security players that are trying to defend the goal at different levels. I'm no longer working directly on MetaMask, but I work very closely with them on an ongoing basis. And, the MetaMask security team have seen a significant success in basically having drainer projects give up and stop.
As a MetaMask user myself, one of the things that you notice from the get-go is the ease of use, right? It's beautiful. The UI is very well planned, and you have all the different features. The fact that you can use the Chrome extension, and that you have the internal browser, and coming from a security field, you understand that there's so many vulnerabilities that are coming with that, and it's very much appreciated the fact that they are able to produce a product that is so intuitive and so easy, but yet also safe. And obviously, the next level would be everything that you've mentioned, the simulations and the real-time assessment of the counterparty wallet or contract that you're interacting with. So I really, in my humble opinion, I think that's the future of Web3. Stupid simple, but also stupid secure, right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's the right term, but
No, I totally agree. And I think the ethos in MetaMask has definitely been, three priorities. One is security first, decentralization, or sort of permissionless innovation, let's say. Those have been the sort of core elements of our ethos. And, but to be fair, we have had to sacrifice sometimes on usability to adhere to those. But, I think we're overcoming some of these usability challenges. And I think with all of the sort of security steps that I talked about, I didn't even talk about the need to obviously protect the keys themselves. And so, we've been working with an amazing partner called Agoric on something called LavaMoat, which is like a secure JavaScript container. And it's basically impenetrable for users that are trying, for malicious actors that are trying to get to the keys themselves. And so, because we're sitting as an extension or a mobile app, the keys are sitting on the client, and these malicious actors are going to try to crack open the software and get hold of those keys. And so we've managed to keep those keys safe for 8+ years now, 9 years. So it is something that we're very proud of, and it's absolutely crucial as a wallet. If we can't keep the keys safe, we've got nothing there. So it's something that we can't compromise. And what we've been trying to do more recently is just layer on additional layers of security, where whilst the keys aren't being compromised, the user is being tricked to use the keys to sign bad malicious transactions. And that's what we've been trying to stop, is the user being tricked, because these malicious actors are so, they pretend you're signing a legitimate, NFT mint or airdrop. They're pretending to be a legitimate investment opportunity or something like that. And all they're doing is trying to get an approval to drain something of value out of the wallet. So it's been a very sort of complex challenge, but I feel like we're winning. I definitely, I was at DevCon a few weeks ago, and I definitely felt a much better sense of people feeling secure using MetaMask now. Whereas previously, I think people would be very careful about only using cold wallet, cold hardware wallets with cold wallets and do very few transactions. Now I think people are starting to, in a sort of responsible way, do more activity with hot wallets and have a little bit more and transact more frequently, which I think is fantastic. I'm not advocating for people to move everything into hot wallet. I think sticking with cold wallets is very important. Sticking with multi-sig is very important for the significant portion of people's savings and their portfolios. But I see people sort of transacting with more confidence now, which I think is super positive for Web3.
Yeah, you mentioned also drainage of wallets, and I remember the LiFi hack that took place a few months ago, and we actually collaborated with MetaMask on urging their clients or their users rather to revoke the permission that they have given to LiFi. And obviously, this happens unfortunately quite often, that users give permission to smart contracts, to protocols. And eventually this might also endanger them at some point if the protocol is hacked.
Yeah, and the protocol can get hacked in so many different ways. You have these supply chain attacks, you have like DNS attacks, you have all sorts of different approaches. And we still have to try to, even if, it appears that we're, transacting with a well-known, trusted protocol, we have to assume that they might have been compromised, and we need to then be able to check that what's being signed is legit and is not draining. and flag it if we think it is. And so we've had a number of instances where we started flagging protocols that we think are that everyone knows to be good quality and trusted, because they unfortunately have had a supply chain attack, or somebody's managed to insert something through a Node.js, an npm package or whatever, so it's just a constant game of cat and mouse, as I say, and I just think the sophistication of these attackers is going to increase, and then and we'll just need more and more sophisticated security mechanisms provided by the ecosystem. So I just see this as an ongoing challenge.
That's for sure. So we're approaching the end of the show, and perhaps kind of a broader question. So you've mentioned quite a few measures that MetaMask and Linea are taking with respect to security and compliance, and most of them are obviously voluntary, right? That's because at the end of the day, you want to create a safer environment, a more secure environment, and you know that it pays off because eventually, projects want to build inside a safe ecosystem, right? But also recently, there has been a lot of chatter about perhaps regulating and imposing, even coercing regulations with respect to security and compliance in the DeFi space, right? So there's this discussion with respect to MiCA in Europe, and there's this discussion, the SEC mentioned something, even though I think that with the new administration, it's no longer relevant. But do you think that some or even any of this should be regulated?
So I think it's fair to regulate where there are linkages to the fiat, the regulated environments such as fiat. I think it's very hard to regulate in a permissionless, decentralized environment, because protocols can then deploy into geographies which don't have similar levels of regulation, and you end up with this sort of arbitrage between regulatory environments. So I think that, but my view is that whilst I think we will see certain sort of core regulatory requirements appear, and these will adjust as organizations like the SEC and the Eurozone start to sort of figure out, and the EU start to figure out their, how they're going to regulate things like, stablecoin adoption and, these rails between, the banking system and these decentralized networks. I do think at this stage it's sort of beholden on us as an ecosystem to apply best practices and to act in the best interests of users and developers. It's difficult for me to second guess what the SEC is going to do or how MiCA is going to evolve. I feel that we just need to try to work in a collaborative way with them and do our best to, make sure that we're showing that we're leading by example with good practices, and making it very, very hard for bad actors to operate in our space. Look, there's plenty of challenges in the Web2 world with banking scams and all sorts going on there, internet scams, and so investment scams just in the traditional space. And so it's natural that some of those scams filter across to our space, and we just have to do our best to try to identify them and filter them out, and then and behave sort of way. But as it's about ours to protect our users and our developers from those that are less responsible.
Yeah, I agree that the key is obviously behaving well and having responsible actors that can set an example, but also communicating with the regulator, as you said, to provide them with some context, because obviously they don't always understand and know what's happening and don't understand the granularity of things. I totally agree with that.
I think that one thing that we, on the MetaMask side, we don't want to do is to end up having to KYC every single user. We like the fact that users can act anonymously and have their privacy. I think that there is a real force for good for that level of privacy on chain for many different reasons. I think that obviously we KYC for things that are necessary, and we do that through partners. So, for example, if a user wants to on-ramp into MetaMask, they need to KYC. If they want to use our debit card, they should KYC. Those sort of things, which I would expect them. But those are optional services that the user opts into and doesn't need to use by default for the wallet. So I think it's nice that we are able to have this sort of coexistence between a sort of regulated KYC'd space in Web3 and a less regulated, more permissionless, anonymous space, and try to find a balance between those two. And just bring in those those regulatory requirements for the actions where the user is really required to do it, and not for everything. Otherwise, you end up overreaching and having to, you end up like KYCing people that maybe don't have addresses or don't have bank accounts and so on, and you start to unfairly exclude portions of the population that we want to start to bring into financial primitives. So I think we really want to try to make the core service, the core wallet, and the Linea chain as inclusive as possible for everyone to be able to participate within the sort of within the constraints of what we're sort of allowed to do from a regulatory perspective, but not have too much overreach. And bring as many people into basically banking the unbankless, the people who are bankless, and providing services to people who just have no access to financial services or investment primitives that favors people that in specific geographies and from specific social economic backgrounds.
Yeah, so on this important note, I will stop. Ian, it was really fascinating. I have like 10 more questions, but unfortunately we're out of time. Thank you so much for being here, and I really learned a lot from the conversation.
Michael, it's always a pleasure to catch up with you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Web3 Watchdogs is sponsored by CyVers, your one-stop shop for Web3 security and threat mitigation. CyVers harnesses the power of AI to eliminate hacks, scams, fraud, and compliance challenges in real time, and even before they happen. For more information, visit cyvers.ai. That's CYVERS.ai.